Well, good morning. This is Ian Roland Crane. It's the morning of Wednesday, the 14th of November, 2018, and it's actually the sun's bursting through the cloud now, and it's so it's a pretty glorious morning, really, for mid-November. Temperatures are very pleasant indeed. Well, the title of this morning's broadcast is UK Mother-Frackers in massive car crash. That's not a literal car crash. That's a metaphorical car crash, mainly related to what's been occurring in their PR. And in reality, it seems that science in this country is now in the hands of a bunch of basically kids barely out of school. And what we've seen the British government and the UK the British government and the UK unconventional gas industry present as science is extremely disturbing, to say the least. Now, shortly after my broadcast on Monday, in which I sort of made the observation that it seemed that Quadrilla had not fracked for over a week. In fact, since triggering the seismic event on Sunday, November 4th, despite an early report in The Guardian a couple of days ago where Quadrilla claimed they had been fracking. Well, that has now been updated, and it seems they certainly hadn't. The other concern was that maybe the British Geological Survey had actually gone on annual leave, or something else, perhaps being instructed not to put any information about seismic events in the Blackpool area into the public domain, which would really be no surprise to most people, as we'll see in a second. Well, shortly after I finished that broadcast, I put out a poll. And in that poll, it was a Twitter poll, and I asked a very straightforward question. And that question was, would you be surprised to learn that the British government had effectively instructed NATASCHA ENGEL, because we assume that she's not really capable of independent thought, so she wouldn't have done it off her own back. But would people be really surprised or shocked even to learn that NATASCHA ENGEL had written to every news editor in the country in an attempt to prevent publication of any criticism of the unconventional gas industry, and in particular to stop reporting any earthquake activity around the Preston Road area. In fact, she went on to say that basically this was poor reporting, inaccurate reporting, and was effectively accusing the British public of being Luddites for not embracing this new source of hydrocarbon. Well, basically, I asked people to declare whether they would be deeply shocked to learn that the Shale Gas Commissioner had been writing to the newsrooms around the country asking them to suppress this information. Would they be shocked, a little surprised, or no surprise at all? Well, once the poll was in, with around 300 votes, only 5% would be deeply shocked, only 3% would be shocked, only 3% a little surprised, and 80% responded by saying there would be no surprise at all. Now, this is a very interesting result, because what it illustrates is that the vast majority of people, certainly those who responded to this poll, and it was a pretty random selection, the vast majority of people actually acknowledge that this country is little more now than a banana republic, where the corporations put their whores into these positions to effectively carry out their will, and basically don't give really two hoots what the public think, as long as they can pursue their agenda of rape and pillage. So imagine my surprise when yesterday morning on Kevin Hollinglake's website, he is of course the MP for Thurston Moreton in North Yorkshire, and he's very much pro-fracking, but to be fair, he has always added the caveat, which is if it can be done safely. Well, it's becoming increasingly evident that Quadrilla certainly do not have the skills, even using arguably the world's most competent oilfield services professionals, i.e. Schlumberger, but they are not able to frack at Preston New Road without triggering seismic events. So the letter appeared on Kevin Hollinrake's website yesterday morning, and I immediately tweeted out a link, as did many other people, making the observation that Kevin Hollinrake was effectively exposing the abuse of office being perpetrated by Natascha Engel in her role as shale gas commissioner. And she actually has the audacity to claim that she is independent. Well, this letter, which is certainly in the public domain now, it's posted throughout the anti-fracking pages on Facebook, and I will put a link to it under this video, just in case people haven't seen it yet. But in that letter, she berates editors, basically saying, well, this is nothing, these are minor events, you know, there's nothing to see here, basically you're wasting your time, you're being sensationalist, move along. And, you know, funnily enough, she's asking the question, as I dip down to get my iPad here, why it is that they're not reporting other events. Well, interestingly, there have just been 2 events since Quadrilla triggered their last event on the 4th of November, and that was one on last Friday, Friday the 9th, at Tredwyn in Flintshire, which was 1.5, and then a 2.3 at Leominster in Herefordshire. Now, quite coincidentally, of course, 1.5 and 2.3 were the 2 most significant events in the Priest Hall saga back in 2011, where Quadrilla triggered 2.3 on, it was April the 1st, and a 1.5 on May 27th. Well, these are probably far enough away to not be attributed to Quadrilla's activities, but it's very, very clear that Quadrilla have effectively been instructed, whether that be by the Oil and Gas Authority, by the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, Claire Perry, Natascha Engel, or their colleagues within the industry, like you know, Tom Pickering, Jim Ratcliffe, Stephen Sanderson, Stephen E. Bowler, because, you know, all of these would have wanted Quadrilla to cease and desist until such time as they found a way to either stop the seismic events, good luck with that, or stop the reporting of them. So, anyway, having made that letter public, and having, you know, managed to get my tweet out, imagine my further surprise when about 30 minutes later, Kevin Hollinrake decided that that letter from Natascha Engel, which he posted without any comment, by the way, should be removed. But too late. Thank you very much, Kevin. It's in the public domain, and people can now see Natascha Engel very much for what she is, which is a whore. There's no other word for it. She is a total whore to the unconventional gas industry. And ever since she got bounced out of Parliament for her pro-fracking stance, losing one of the safest Labour seats in the country in North East Derbyshire to Lee Rowley, a Tory, who stood on an anti-fracking ticket. And he's doing an excellent job, by the way. Well, Natascha then goes on to the INEOS payroll to write a brochure, supposedly, which has yet to find its way into the public domain. But if it's as articulate as the letter that she's written, I mean, you know, it'll be clear for all to see exactly where her loyalties lie, i.e. with her paymasters. And now here we see literally an abuse of office in an attempt to suppress the publication of information which is clearly in the best interests of the British public, and particularly those who live in the sacrifice zones right across the north of England. Well, to add to the woes of the unconventional gas industry, Channel 4 ran an absolutely superb report on the effects of the seismic activity in Groningen in northeast Netherlands. And you know, maybe somebody at Channel 4 watched the last episode of Fracking Nightmare, because, you know, this is exactly what we addressed in episode, I think it was 120, a couple of weeks ago. And the number of properties that have suffered damage as a result of the seismic activity above the gas field in northeast Netherlands is very, very significant. So much so that the Dutch government has now effectively announced that gas extraction will cease. I think they've said 2020, but basically the damage is very much done. Now, this is a conventional gas field, and it has been mined for, I believe, some 40 plus years. But the seismic activity only really started to manifest about a decade ago, and then became very, very significant around about 2009. So if anybody hasn't seen that Channel 4 report, then do go to the Channel 4 YouTube channel or to Frack Free TV, where you can see that report. Now, funnily enough, obviously, the usual suspects all claim that basically, there is no comparison with Groningen and what's going on in the UK. Really? Well, not yet. But, what's embarrassing is the people that the industry trot out to, defend the industry. And during the course of this report, the person questioned from the Oil and Gas Authority was a guy whose name escapes me for 1 second because he's instantly forgettable. And this is Tom Wheeler. There we go. Tom Wheeler, who's the Director of Regulation at the Oil and Gas Authority. Now, apart from the fact that he looks like he's come to the office straight from his paper round, he clearly had no detailed knowledge of what had occurred in Groningen and was unable to make any comment regarding the relationship between the events in Holland and the events to date in Lancashire. And, it was so clear that he was out of his depth that, I thought, well, let's have a look at this guy, because he admits he's not a geologist. So what is he? Well, gasp of surprise, he's a solicitor. And, he's Director of Regulation at the Oil and Gas Authority, previously having worked with DEC, the Department of Energy and Climate Change, before it morphed into the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And before that, he was a solicitor, an in-house solicitor within the oil and gas industry. So, clearly somebody who is going to promote the industry and defend the industry rather than do the job he's supposed to do, which is be Director of Regulation. And because he knows jack about the industry, then he can be steamrolled. Basically, he would be extremely susceptible to the BS pumped out by the representatives of the oil and gas industry. Say, no, Tom, you don't get this. I know you don't understand this, but there's nothing to worry about. This is normal. So, just do what you need to do to pretend that there's actually some regulatory control in this country. Well, so that was car crash number 1. And then last night, it was revealed that after the last seismic event in the Fylde back in early November, the British government had commissioned the University of Liverpool to actually do a study. Well, actually they didn't. What they really wanted is the University of Liverpool to come up with a whole bunch of BS that they could put out as having come from the University of Liverpool to justify the tremors that are being reported, or recorded and reported, at least at the moment, at Preston Road. So what do? They trot out on TV Dr. Ben Edwards, who looks as though he also had just come off of the paper round. I mean, what is it? Everyone seems to be... Yeah, I mean, we have a major problem, by the way, with people being put into these positions at an extremely early stage of their career, and they have no experience. And now one might argue that not being constrained by experience can be an asset, but it can also be a major Achilles heel. And I have great concerns that the infrastructure of not just this country but the planet may be on the cusp of serious collapse due to the lack of real knowledge and skills, you know, within industry and certainly within academia. Well, Dr. Ben Edwards is seen on the interview bouncing a football on the floor of his office, claiming that that's the equivalent of a 0.9 seismic event. And then he drops a bag of flour and says, well, this is the equivalent of a 1.1 event. But of course, you know, what we don't know is how much movement there is in that floor. You know, was he on the first floor? Was he on the ground floor? Was it a concrete floor? Was there wood joists under the floor? Which, of course, would have caused additional movement. But either way, it's an irrelevance, because it's, as actually stated during the course of the report by Dr. Stuart Hazeldine of University of Edinburgh, and he made the observation that it's not what occurs on the surface that is important, it's what's occurring underground, it's what's occurring in the vicinity of the well, because that's what causes the problems. That's what caused Quadrilla to abandon Priest Hall back in 2011, because they eventually acknowledged that they had damaged the well downhole, and they had and what had caused that was fracking into a fault, and a minor seismic movement had damaged the well, at which point, if you know it, then and you're professional, then you have to shut it in, because from that point forward it's a liability. So it's the downhole situation that is the crucial element here. So obviously right now there's a major PR campaign to try to mislead the gullible and say, look, there's really nothing to worry about, you know, this is nothing more than a truck driving past, or a truck driving past your house, or even extracting rock from a surface quarry. It's going to cause vibration, but vibration at ground level is not going to damage a well 2 kilometers down, whereas the fracking of the geology around the area of the horizontal section is going to run the risk of damaging that well and then leading to the potential contamination. And it might not manifest immediately. As we saw in Australia, it took 2 years for the problems to really start to manifest. Now, so what's happening? It looks as though Quadrilla have effectively put the first of their 2 horizontal wells in mothballs, because it's become very apparent that they can't even get to more than about halfway of the desired pressure for a full frack. So they know fine well that if they do ramp up those pumps to 7,500 plus PSI, then it's going to trigger an event somewhat greater than I think the maximum 1.1 that they've triggered to date. The likelihood is it's going to be 2 point something, and of course the calls to shut this industry down once and for all will increase very significantly. So what are they doing? Well, you know, what we also know, by the way, is that the HSE are basically not monitoring this as they should be. You would think that because of the focus, the scrutiny on this industry, the HSE and the Environment Agency would have somebody permanently located on site to monitor this. But no, they still rely on Quadrilla marking their own homework and actually advising them of any problems. So, well number 1 in mothballs. So well number 2, do they have permission yet to frack well number 2? Have they been through all the appropriate process to get permission? And the moment, of course, that they do fire up the pumps to frack well 2, then the likelihood is that it is going to trigger more seismic activity in the Preston New Road area. So basically, it has not been a good 10 days for the industry. Ever since basically the last seismic event of the 4th of November, the industry is like, oh my God, you know, is this all over? Well, the answer is yes, it is. But you don't realise it yet, and of course Greg Clark has nicely insulated himself with Claire Perry, and Claire Perry thinks she has insulated herself with NATASCHA ENGEL. But you know, once this all goes pear-shaped, well, which it already is, but once it goes completely pear-shaped, then all three of these people, and by the way, Saeed Javid isn't off the hook on this, because of course he was the one who overturned the Lancashire County Council decision to permit them to frack in the first place. So now what's happening obviously tomorrow is NATASCHA ENGEL is going to Preston Road and to Rossiter. And you know, I must confess that I have always counselled that it is absolutely imperative that any conversation, any discussion with the industry or with the government on these issues should be in the public domain. Or let me go further than that, must be in the public domain. Because, I mean, I'm sure it's of no surprise, but although they've given up now, but the industry back in 2014 in particular, and early 2015, was making a bit of an effort to seduce me. Oh, Ian, you know, come and have a coffee with us. Not a cat's chance in hell. There is no way that I would ever consider having any kind of private, off-the-record discussion with anyone from the industry or from the relevant government departments. Any conversation has to be in the public domain. If it's not, they take advantage, they write the press release, and you're left saying, well, actually, that wasn't what occurred. Sorry, press release is out there. You know, basically, we had a meeting and we've allayed the fears of those whom we met with. So, it's your call, obviously, ultimately, but I question the wisdom of private meetings with these sociopaths. They are not interested in what you think. If you think you have any possibility of getting them to listen to and acknowledge your concerns, you are unfortunately still living in cuckoo land. That's not the way this works. The only interest they have is pushing their agenda. And all they need to say is that they met with representatives of the local community and have listened to their concerns and allayed their fears. And that's what goes out into the media. So I do hope that if it is the case that a small group of people have conceded that they should meet with NATASCHA ENGEL, that they have a rethink, and that meeting should be open to the wider community, and then the wider community report on that meeting. And of course, if at all possible, it should be filmed, it should be recorded, because that's the only way the truth actually gets out into the public domain. So sorry about that. I know that some people don't have the attention span of 20 odd minutes, keep getting requests to do the shorter versions of these. Well, but you know, the reality is those with the short attention spans aren't going to make the difference in this either way. It's those people who are truly committed to bringing about the demise of this industry who will make the difference. And believe you me, that difference is being made. You know, here we are nearly 6 years after the moratorium was lifted back in 2012, and still nothing more than a mini frack in this country. And those mini fracks are demonstrating that the geology of the Boland Shale is totally unsuitable for the mass exploitation of hydrocarbons. So, you know, it's thank you and good night, but obviously the industry ain't going to go down without a fight. So thanks for joining me today. I will be in the studio, excuse me, I will be in the studio tomorrow evening with an episode of Humanity vs Insanity at 7:30, and with Fracking Nightmare at 9 o'clock. And on Monday of next week, that's Monday the 19th, please join me at Southwark Crown Court in southeast London, where I shall be supporting David Noakes, the previous manufacturer and supplier of GC-MAF, a proven, very effective cancer treatment. Indeed, in many cases, curing of cancer. Well, the Medicines and Healthcare Regulatory Authority are seeking to incarcerate David. They are seeking a jail sentence for the crime of curing people or alleviating people's symptoms who are suffering from cancer, but on the basis that he was marketing an unlicensed medicine. There's no interest by the government or the courts or the Medicines and Healthcare Regulatory Authority in the effectiveness of that treatment, because the Cancer Act of 1939 forbids anyone to have the audacity to claim that there is any alternative to cancer treatments than chemotherapy. So if you want to see British justice at its worst, then then do come along to Southwark Crown Court on Monday at 9:30. Meanwhile, I will see you either tomorrow evening, or I'll be back with a live stream at 8:30 on Friday. You have a good day, and I'll catch you later.